From the city of broad shoulders, this is Chicago Unscripted with CBS News Chicago's Joe Donlon.
I was in college at Marquette University back in the early 80s when my roommate put together a road trip down to Chicago for Mike Royko's Rib Fest. If you know, you know. And this episode of Chicago Unscripted is as much for those who know as those who don't. My guest, actor Mitchell Bisschop, admits he was one of those who didn't know about Mike Royko, and he was born in Evanston, went to Barrington High. But you might call Mitchell a Royko expert now. More on that in a minute. But back to the Rib Fest. What we walked into was a massive party, a sprawling cookout in Grant Park for the city. It felt like you could see and smell the smoke for miles. This was more than a celebration of food, though. It was a chance for Chicago to come together and break bread, sort of a kumbaya weekend hosted by the late Mike Royko, a legendary newspaper columnist who spoke for Chicago. He wrote a daily column for 30 years, worked for the Daily News, then the Sun-Times, and finally for the Tribune. Royko took on everything and everyone, from the mayor, Richard J. Daley, to the machine, to the mob, from Sinatra to sports. He always seemed to speak for the little guy. There are plenty of books to read about the impact of Royko's respected writing, not just in Chicago, but nationwide. Millions of people read his work in syndication. Or you could check out a one-man play written by and starring my guest, Mitchell Bisschop. I went to see the play at the Chopin Theater last month. It was something I wanted to do to learn more about Royko and what he meant to Chicago. 2 hours later, it felt like more than just a biography. It was an entertaining and valuable history lesson about a figure who is considered an icon in Chicago media. Looking back at that college road trip now, I find myself saying, I wish I knew then what I know now. This play gave me that opportunity, and maybe the conversation you're about to hear will encourage you to see the play and take a trip back in time to what some call the real Chicago. Quick side note here, if you're enjoying the content, I invite you to hit subscribe and leave a review. I'm still figuring all this out, but apparently it helps with the distribution and reach. For now, here's the man bringing Mike Royko to life on stage, Mitchell Bisschop. Mitchell, thanks for the time. It's great to have you.
Thank you for having me, Joe.
Glad to be back home for this run. I know one person who is, and that's your mom.
Yeah. She definitely, it's funny because my parents, they're very proud of me. They're very happy and stuff. But the joke is that they come to visit me for 3 days and then they go to Vegas for 5 days. So they love me, but they really love Vegas,
Well, I met her in the lobby of your show, and I'm telling you, she was like a rock star. People were all around her. The ushers were like, that's Mitchell's mom over there.
That's so funny. Yeah, I mean, you went up and approached her and you gave her your number and said, hey, have them call me. I'm doing a podcast and all this. And she handed it to me, and now she acts like she's my agent. She's
getting you gigs.
Hey, have you called my friend Joe yet? Have you, hey, your mother, she's wheeling and dealing. It's a funny thing, actually. It's a funny little story. It's that my buddy was running the box office the day my mom came, and the first time my mom came, and he jokingly said to her, she said, oh, is there a place to get water? And, in the theater, the Chopin Theater, there's a little bar with concessions and stuff. Yeah. And he said to her, go over there and just tell him you're putting it on Mitch's tab, as a joke, Uh-huh. So apparently she racked up a big bill of grabbing stuff and saying, and she would just point to the theater owner and go, put it on Mitch's tab. So you're not kidding when she walked around acting like a rock star.
Oh, yeah. No, trust me. I really saw it firsthand. So you live in LA. You're from here, though. I'm curious, when you come back, what's the first thing you do? Where do you like to go?
There's a diner that I really like to go to right away, which is on Lincoln, Wellington, and Southport, which is called S&G Diner. And it's a place when I lived here and I was doing theater out here in the early 2000s, it was a place I used to go almost every morning for breakfast. And, it's the same family's owned it for, 2 generations now. And so I always love going there and saying hi. And it's kind of far away from where I'm living right now, but I still had to go. That was like the very first thing that I had to do. And I had to get a proper Italian beef somewhere,
Okay. Where's that, by the way? I'm curious.
Well, it just depends. I mean, depending on where I lived, you always find the good places. There's plenty of places to get a good Italian beef, I think. So right now I'm up in Andersonville, so I go to Byron's. And there's Budecki's not too far away too. So
don't sleep on the hot dog at Byron's. And the fries are pretty good too.
The fries are killer, man. Yeah. I have that. If I'm going to eat something like that, I usually make it a special occasion, like a beef is sort of my special occasion.
Yeah.
But my buddy what he did was he'd get a beef and then get a hot dog and he'd say, this is for dessert.
I like the way he's thinking. So when and where did the acting bug start for you, Mitchell?
Oh gosh, when I was real young, you watch movies and TV, and I think I was real young. I was in middle school and I told my parents, I want to try this like drama stuff. In my middle school, there was no drama club or anything like that. So we went to Cutting Hall and like community theater and Palatine and stuff. And it would be, I took classes and then they do like short plays with the kids and stuff. And then once I got into high school, that was kind of what I did. My theater teacher sort of became a mentor to me. And for those 4 years, I just
at Barrington High School, right?
Yeah, Barrington High School. Yeah, I just kind of delved in. And then that was all I really wanted to do, theater, acting, writing, stuff in performing arts.
Right.
And that's always been kind of my shtick,
Yeah. And then you decide to go to Ithaca College, which is one of the top ranked theater programs in the country, right?
Yeah, it was at least when I went, it was pretty high up there. They had I didn't go for musical theater, but they had a great musical theater. The thing that made them special at the time, anyway, I don't know how it is now, it's quite a few years now, was that their musical theater people had to take the same classes as the acting people, which I think was unique in that world at the time, because musical theater usually had their own program and acting usually had its own program. Mm-hmm. And these people had to basically pass the acting to stay in the musical theater.
So when you graduate from Ithaca, I'm wondering how this works, because you spent some time in a couple of different theater companies. You went to, Upright Citizen Brigade, and then the Pit, which is the People's Improv Theater in New York. And then you come back to Second City.
No, I actually went the other way. I went from Ithaca, I came to Chicago, and then I was in the Second City Conservatory there. I'm a big proponent, I believe, if anybody's, I'm in my 40s now, but I still take classes. I'll still take a 101 class I look forward to that stuff, because you meet people, you get a real sense of, class is class. You never stop learning about the art of acting and the art of the way people react to things and the way people are, the way those things kind of change throughout generations and stuff. So I came to Chicago first, did Annoyance and Second City. Sometimes the people in the cast, there were more people in the cast than there were in the audience. I did a play in Lakeview in a small theater, and we had 10 people in the cast, and an average of 2 people would show up per show,
Wow. But you have to perform, right? No matter how many are in the tent, you have to do it.
We take a vote, and, and you could see the people who didn't want to do the show would just be like, why are we doing this? And everyone else was like, we have to, people paid, gotta dance for your food. So, it's
when like the old joke, they called the theater and said, what time does the show start? And they said, what time can you be here?
Yeah, I've had a few experiences like that, but it's great. You have to love it. You have to like the grind, you have to enjoy, you have to be able to laugh at the disappointments like that.
One of my friends took one of the improv classes, and I've always wanted to do that at Second City. And I understand the value in it, but I'm curious because a lot of people are just sort of, as you well know, just sort of effortlessly and naturally funny. What do they teach you? How do you study that?
Oh my gosh, there's so, it's a whole art form in and of itself, there are tricks and traits to improv. There's a whole methodology about improv and how to create an interesting scene. You know, I mean, there's improv, the art form, and then there's improv, the rehearsal tool. You know, there's I've went to school for theater, and theater is very different from improv, you know, and but we used a lot of improv in theater to create scenes, to create moments. You know, sometimes in theater anyway, you throw away the script and you say, all right, let's just play the scene the way it's supposed to be played without any dialogue. You know, I think comedy improv, Second City, Improv Olympic, the Pit, it's very different because those are meant to take the improv and move it to the stage, to be in front of people.
Yeah.
So there is that performative element to it. But yeah, I mean, it's great. I always look at like people who do musical improv where they make up those songs like they're aliens, you know, because I couldn't in 100 years do that, you know, but there's a methodology to it. There's a way that they do it. There's tricks that they're able to lock into. It's like anything else. It's like practice, I think.
Yeah. The more you do it, the better you get at it. But we've all been to those Second City shows and they just throw out, okay, give me a word on this. And the next thing you know, they have this skit and everybody's laughing out loud. I don't know. Is there a one trick that you could maybe share with people who, you know, feel like, oh, improv is never anything I could do, but think about it this way and it might help you?
No.
Thanks, Mitchell.
I think you know, everyone always says the yes and that basically is like the mantra of every improv thing is yes and your partner, which means like if they say something, you know, don't just go, no, it's not like that. You know, the sky is blue. No, it's not. It's green. You know, you kill a scene that way. The yes and is like you're engaging in the scene. You know, you're moving the scene forward. So that is like the one thing they teach you on day one is like yes and your partner. You know, but that's stuff they've been teaching me since. You know, you take. It's funny because actually I think I took an improv class at Second City when I was 13 years old. When the Second City, there used to be a Second City in Rolling Meadows, and they did classes there. And so I took a class there when I was like 13, and that was like the first thing you learn. You think, oh, okay, that's interesting, you know. But you know,
but even then, you have to get past yes and. You need a funny, you know, something that's funny. A lot of times, I find myself on the air. You know, there's a situation and a line will come to me, but then other times it won't. And then we go to commercial break and then it comes to me.
Yeah, I'm sure that happens to the funniest people on earth too. You know, it's a muscle like everything else. It's a muscle. You learn the craft, you get stronger at it, and then it just kind of comes naturally. I couldn't do it today. I mean, I haven't taken a class at UCB or anything in a while. And, you know, I perform with a script. You know, Mike Royko's words are pretty much set in stone. I'm not deviating from that. It's only when I screw up that I pull out the improv gene when I can, you know. Yeah. But otherwise, it's more out of fear than anything else.
So in your reel, I did see some commercial work you've done as well. You did a commercial with Clayton Kershaw, the pitcher for the Dodgers.
Yes, I did. We did it at his house. And he had to leave to go to practice. And so, you know, there was a trailer, not for him, for everyone else. There was a trailer, there were extras, there was, you know, camera setups. We shot like, I think 2 or 3 or 4 like little bites with him, you know. So they shot his stuff and then he was like, all right, I gotta go to practice and before a game, and he was like, yeah, guys, hang out, you're good. You know, his like family was there and stuff. I think they used, even when he left, they used his like wife and kid in the spot and everything.
Meanwhile, you're swimming in his pool.
I know it was great. I mean, couldn't have been a nicer guy, and like totally 100% game, you know.
Yeah.
And so you know, actors, you just never know. I'm a big sports fan, so I was like in awe. I couldn't believe that this guy was letting us hang out in his backyard and play pretend. But other people on the crew had no idea who this guy was, even though it's LA and he's a famous pitcher, you know.
So it took me a minute on your webpage to figure out that you're not actually competing with me in the podcast space, but you are the host of, if I have this right, Conspiratheria. Is this right? This is like your takeoff on you're making fun of podcasts.
Yeah, you do deep cuts. It's more a rip on. Here's the problem. That was a pandemic project, and the problem with that pandemic project is that character is like an Alex Jones character. Did you listen to it?
I listened to the episode on pot.
Yeah. So it's a Alex Jones type character who believes everything is real. You know, talks about ghosts, talks about all this stuff like that, and all fake conspiracies that we made up. The problem is that now we live in a world where there's so many conspiracy theories going around that people actually believe that it kind of took the fun out of doing a show where you make fun of people who are into conspiracy theories.
So speaking of pandemic projects, this Royko play that you wrote and came up with was one of those, right? Your mom told me that you came up with this during the pandemic.
You mean my agent?
Your agent.
Yeah, I do. Part of my shtick is that I do a lot of solo theater. I'll write plays for myself to perform. It's its own kind of art form. The process of writing it, what the show is about. A lot of people do personal stories when they do these kind of shows. Mm-hmm. I'm not that way. I mean, there's a lot of personal elements into the shows, no matter what I write about. But they could be absurd. They could be weird. This one's a lot more grounded, But it's
how did you come up with the idea to do this? To do Mike Royko's story?
So I was writing a different solo show at the time, and in LA, we have this group of Chicago people that we hang out with. So when you go to when I lived in New York and I lived in LA and I've lived in Chicago. In New York and LA, the first thing I do is go right to wherever the Bears bar is, and find my people. So, for years we've been sitting around talking and you just talk nonsense, Bill Veeck, Studs Terkel, this. So I'd heard this name Mike Royko all around. I knew everybody else always brought up, but I never knew who Mike Royko was. So during the pandemic, I'm writing this other thing, and sort of to take a break, I go online and start saying, I want to just know, I'm curious. I want to know who Mike Royko is, He was able to capture something that reaches sort of through time, which means that as a writer, he landed on universal truths about human beings, And so part of me writing it was like, here I am, a guy in LA. I know I'm going to put it up in LA, at least for a workshop, just to see how it plays and see if a LA audience connects with it. Well, then damn, a Chicago audience is definitely going to play with it.
Right.
Or connect with it. So I wanted that challenge. I wanted to see if this is viable because I wasn't sure, because it was connecting with me in such a strong way. Was that just because I'm from Chicago, or is that because the words he's saying really are this powerful?
Yeah, so I was wondering why you did LA and New York first. And I guess that was just to sort of to dial it in, I guess. How was it received in those two cities?
Good. I mean, New York was both of them were very small productions, and they were made, the LA one was more of a workshop. The New York one was like a performance for friends, just to get a sense of how they felt about it. I think the show, once I got Steve Scott on, who's the director of this version, really opened it up. And I think it went from what we used to call a term paper to an actual play, because it was a lot of doing the columns and letting people sort of explore the columns versus knowing who the man is too, and giving the context of the thing. So I think, I didn't expect it to be as popular in those places as I did here, but I knew that if people connected with it, especially things like, Jackie Robinson and MLK,
right.
And then things that people appreciated but didn't quite connect with are things like the Picasso, and talking about Mayor Daley. Right. Those are things that are very Chicago centric. So I had a guy who had done his own version of Royko doing columns on stage. In the 80s, a guy named Kevin Purcell, he had done a version that I had found online, and I wrote him and called him up, and we had a long chat. And he saw the show in LA. I sent him a video, and he said to me, he said, audiences in Chicago get these things.
Sure.
The way that like there's moments where people didn't laugh, but I know, when you bring it to Chicago, they will laugh
it's
at
going to
those
work.
moments. Yeah. He's like, so the audience liked it, but they didn't. It's not ingrained the way it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's something that. Oh,
go ahead.
I was to say that's something that he was so great at, is that like a laser beam right into people's souls, and that's how he was able to write for 34 years every single day, even if it wasn't the greatest column or an outright bad one. He had created enough credit to go the next day and have you look at the paper and boom, there was a great one.
Right. Well, most of the dialogue comes from his columns directly. And in the play, you really get a feel for the kind of person he was. And you do a great job of bringing him to life. And
about 95% of it is stuff that he actually said. So I went through interviews. I went through books, anything that kind of mentioned him, I would pull up just to see if it had anything that I could squeeze something out of, to create the story. Because creating a play with just someone else's words, there's some finagling that goes on, moving dialogue around or cutting something short or even shortening it so that it makes more sense to an audience today.
Well, you bring him to life and you feel as you're watching the play, his passion, not just for the job, but for the people of Chicago. And it's why he connected with so many people.
100%. Yeah. I mean, he got offered jobs to work in Washington and he turned them down. It probably would have paid more. It probably would have been a bigger audience. It would have been syndicated. It would have been national, but he turned them all down because he felt connected to Chicago. He felt like writing about Chicago was what he knew and what he felt comfortable doing.
Well, a lot of the show is set at the Billy Goat Tavern, and it made me feel right at home because I've had a few beers in the belly of Lower Michigan with Rick Pearson from the Tribune, and that was the place to hang out for media types, especially from the Trib. But is that where Mike Royko got a lot of his stories?
I think he got them from everywhere. I think he probably used the Billy Goat more to just relax and chill out,
Yeah.
I think probably that was where to get away from the stories. I think, it's interesting because talking now with some of his leg creatures, some of his assistants and stuff, Ellen Warren told this great story to me where she said, he'd fly out of the office and go, find out if a toupee can kill a man. And then her job was just to go research
of whether a toupee could kill a man. Was this the Sinatra spat?
No, but it was just one of those things where he would get an idea or he'd hear something and he'd have to get it, verified. And so that they'd go and find out, they didn't have the internet at the time. So they'd have to go and call people and, and what does that even mean? Does it mean that the guy's going to choke on it? That it, that it's poisonous? Like, they didn't have anything to go on. So I think people would call him and he'd answer the phone and he'd listen to their gripes. He'd listen to this. He'd walk around, I think probably the newsroom and try out lines on people and find out.
So we mentioned the Sinatra spat. You do it in the play. What happened? Sinatra wrote him a letter. Did Sinatra call Royko a pimp, didn't he?
Yeah, he calls him a pimp. Yeah. So he basically Sinatra wrote this column about how, hey, you got all these little old ladies getting mugged, on State Street while Sinatra has a police detail while he's staying in a suite for him to sing in a nightclub. It wasn't the only time Royko went after Sinatra. There's been a few times, when he was talking about him in Vegas and this and that, but this was the one where Sinatra flew off the handle. And so he wrote a letter to Mike Royko saying, how dare you say this to me? How dare I don't wear toupee, because Royko is saying, any drunk with 20 cents who doesn't like to wear blue eyes, parts his hairpiece can make a phone call in the Chicago Police Department, take it seriously. And Sinatra said, you can pull my hair, and if it moves, I'll give you $100,000. If it doesn't, I punch you in the mouth. How about that? And Sinatra's pissed off. But he wrote the letter, and actually what he did was he CC'd Mayor Daley and the sheriff, or police chief, and copy wrote it. Had a copy written, so that if it ever got published, it had to be published in full. So that Royko couldn't just take bits and pieces of it and twist it. Yeah. You'd have to print the whole thing. So Royko prints the whole thing and then goes step by step his response to the column. So, it's so funny because Mike Royko, it's amazing, especially doing this play and seeing people afterwards and talking to people. People stick around. They want to tell me a story of when, Mike, they just looked at Mike from across the bar. They were in Billy Goat in the 80s. And they were young, and they looked across the bar, and there was Mike Royko, and their heart dropped. They never said anything to him. They were too afraid, but they still remember the image of him sitting across the bar, drinking a drink at the Billy Goat. And 40 years later, they're coming to this play and staying afterwards to tell me about it. Wow. And I just love that stuff. I love that stuff. Everyone has a story. He inspired so much in so many people. It's incredible. And I think anybody who listens to this, if they're inspired to just pick up a book or Google him, read one column that people say is great. It's probably in the show. Yeah. But read one column and you'll see what people are talking about.
Well, you spend a lot of time in the show going over his, I guess, very combative relationship with the mayor, the boss, Richard J. Daley. Do you think there was real animosity between them, or do you think there was at least an element of, if not mutual admiration, at least respect?
I think
that sounds like a no.
No, I think there is. I thought a lot about this actually, because I think Royko really truly didn't like the way the mayor ran the city. I think he really hated that politics of cronyism and the nepotism that Daley, the naked nepotism that Daley showed, where and I think his angle was always looking out for the working man, the guy. And so when you have somebody who is in charge of all these jobs that you have to kiss his butt or else you're not going to work in the city, I think Royko really on a fundamental level hated that. But on the other hand, I do think that he had a respect for him. I do think that he had at least not an admiration, but at least a respect for what the guy was doing. And also, I think he really did believe that Daley embodied this attitude of the city.
One of my takeaways from the show, Mitchell, was that Royko was ahead of his time, and many of the scenes lay out how he was, fast forward 40 years later, on the right side of history when it came to a lot of things that we're still dealing with today, like gun violence and race. You talk about MLK and the Cubs and their struggle that that he tied to the fact that they wouldn't sign black players. There were a lot of issues that Royko was really sort of out on a limb on at the time.
Yeah. I mean, people stopped, something that doesn't make it into the play, but is in the column where the Daily News is shut down. And so Daily News was the Chicago Daily News was an evening paper, and the Sun-Times was the morning paper. And so people used to read the paper. There would be a morning edition, evening edition. The Daily News was the evening edition. And he liked that. But I think because people started watching news when they came home from work, an evening paper didn't make much sense anymore. So, I think they didn't have any, I don't know if the circulation was bad or what, financially, I'm sure it was expensive to run the paper, but they shut down. And Royko wrote this beautiful piece about how, it was a courageous paper. You know, it was a paper that wasn't afraid to be courageous and go and buck the norm. And that helped its downfall because, you know, you had people who read Royko and get so pissed off that they would cancel their subscription to the paper. You know, it wasn't just him, but it would, you know, one thing here and there, and it whittles away your circulation. And I think they ran into that. And so part of his thing was like, courage didn't kill the paper, but it certainly contributed to it because they didn't tell us to not write a story. Even if the mayor didn't like it, we put it in there. And then a lot of the mayor's minions would cancel the paper because they didn't want that to happen. And so these things contributed, but they didn't kill the paper, you know?
Right.
But
he did run into trouble into trouble later. And you, that is in the play when he wrote an article that said that Mexico should be invaded and turned over to Club Med. And it led to protests outside the Trib.
Well, it is kind of silly too. I mean, not that it's silly, but I think, you know, the whole purpose of that column is that he's saying, all right, every week I'm going to assume the identity of a follower of one of these presidential candidates. So last week it was whoever was Bob Dole or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't remember what year it was necessarily, but he said, I'm going to assume the followers, you know, their opinions. Okay. So this particular column was Pat Buchanan. Well, Pat Buchanan was he was xenophobic as far as it went with you know, Mexico and all that. He really had it in his cross. So Royko took it like he does to the natural, you know, end. Well, you know, my theory on Royko was that he always said to people, look, if this is the way you want the world to look, let's take it to its conclusion.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what this column is. It gets even bigger than, you know, invading Mexico and turning it over to Club Med. You know, he said, what else has Mexico ever given us? And he can't given the planet except tequila, you know, things like this, you know. So certainly it was offensive, but it was spoken from. And then he concludes the column by saying, you know, I don't know if I can vote for Pat Buchanan. He's such a wuss on this stuff, you know, like he's not going far enough, you know?
Oh, right. So, in today's world, it almost would have been an Onion article.
Yes, it would have been an Onion article.
But people took it seriously.
Yeah, at the time, which is so weird because it's not like he hadn't been doing this for 30 years. But I think, you know, some of the language he uses in the column, I think, you know, if you picked up an Onion and didn't know it was fake, and the column was written well, you might think, this is crazy. How could this happen? You know, but, you know, so, yeah, who knows? I mean, I think it was probably the city rebelling against, you know, at that point, he had become ingrained in Chicago and he'd become sort of the status quo in a sense, you know, so it stops looking like he's punching up and starts looking like he's punching down at that point, which is couldn't have been further from the truth, but you know, it's the way people perceive it. We see a lot of that in our society today too, you know.
That's what I was going to say, because I was taking notes during the play in the dark, so my writing is a little hard to read, but I'm wondering what you think about a story or a column that stood out to you like one did to me about the newspaper is not the truth. That's what Daley said. And it reminded me of some of what the media deals with today. And I think there was even a part where he said, the mayor said, don't print what he said, print what he meant. And were there stories that you found that Royko wrote about that are happening and still true today?
Oh yeah. I mean, you mean, as far as
things we're dealing with today.
Oh yeah. Well, you mentioned them like, gun violence, you know, I mean, his perspective on that is so strong, you know, and it's still going on like every day today. You know, we still have this, we just can't figure it out as a nation. We just can't figure it out. I mean, there were things that he said, like, well, you know, talking about almost a supernatural ability to understand the times. Like there's a column about how O.J. Simpson will get off. You know, before he got off, There was a comment about how OJ would get off. And the reason is because you're going to sit there, if they could put a shred of doubt that these cops planted any kind of evidence, no jury in Los Angeles, based on what had happened the last few years before that, which were the riots, the Rodney King thing,
right,
are ever going to convict someone, because it's completely plausible in their minds that a cop could have planted evidence in that situation. But I mean, gun violence, the way that, politics is run today is still the same. It's like, as much as we think we've changed or evolved, things just, they don't get better. Sometimes they don't get better.
Yeah, and he was on the cutting edge of all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the race stuff, he recognized early that, like, these aren't immigrants. This isn't an immigrant class. These are people who came to Chicago to get away from the oppression of the South, and they're getting treated almost exactly the same way as they are in the South. But they have this attitude like, well, we're in the North. This doesn't happen here. But Royko was saying this absolutely happens here. And the more you turn your back on it. So that's, a big part of that Martin Luther King thing was like, he didn't get hit in the head with rocks in the South. He got hit in the head with rocks in Chicago.
Yeah.
We were supposed to be this evolved city at the time, and it just wasn't true.
Yeah. You could argue, Mitchell, that there aren't writers like him anymore. Or is it maybe possible that there isn't a place for writers like that anymore? And I guess my point is that people like Royko or maybe Ron Majors or Bill Curtis, there just weren't that many people who were considered the voice of a city. I mean, no one has that bullhorn anymore, because everyone has a bullhorn, essentially.
Yeah, I think too, it takes a very specific certain person to be that person too, and I think there's a lot of people who, when Royko was around and after he died, thought, well, I'm going to be Royko now, or I'm as good as him, or this is what I aspire to. And they just may not have the talent, perspective. There's a lot of people today, I think, who still think that they're, maybe they don't consciously know who Mike Royko is, but they're still trying to be that voice to a certain amount of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you find your audience, it's like prize boxers, right? If you have the greatest boxer in the entire world, but he's got no one to fight, he's got no competition, it's a waste, because at some point he ages out of being the greatest boxer in the world. You get 10 boxers who are really good, but they could, so, you can never say, well, Mike Tyson would have, Muhammad Ali would have easily beaten Mike Tyson. Well, we just never know, because they never overlapped in that way. And
well, John, you could argue John Cass tried to pick up the baton, and he certainly went after the Richard M. Daley, but I mean, Cass, I'm sure, would argue that he got canceled. And here's a guy who certainly, has moved to the right over the years, but
sure.
And he could take on, half the city, if not more, but he's gone.
Yeah. But it also, was he as, no offense to him, but was he as good and clever as Mike Royko was,
or was it that he didn't represent the people in the city like Royko did, maybe?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question, because I think that's perfect. Did he represent the city the way the city needed the representation at the time when he was writing too? It's a perfect storm in a lot of ways. I think the magic of Mike Royko, whether he was writing then, today, or in 100 years from now, he still would have risen to the top, because his writing is special. A guy who's from Barrington, who didn't know who Mike Royko was 4 years ago, I'm now somewhat of an expert, because every day I'll find something new that I haven't read before and think about how it could fit into the play, or how it fit into his life, or how it fits into the sort of the zeitgeist of politics, of race, of community think, of whatever,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I it's funny because, you said the word canceled, and it's like, yeah, sure, maybe Mike might have been canceled, or, canceling is, we say this about comedians. It's like, well, you can make that joke, but that joke has to be the funniest joke anyone has ever heard about that. You know, if you're going to go out on, you're going out on that limb. So you better bring your A material, you know? And it's like Royko could have been canceled right away. They could have told Mario, you're out of here, pal. But he connected with people so strongly. And I think that's something that is more rare than we think. Certainly there are going to be hundreds of people who come out. You know, there are people writing today who have blogs, who are commentators who are the Mike Royko of today, but do they elevate to that point? You know, I don't know. I don't think so. And there aren't people who are celebrating their writing, you know, so much as their point of view. Right. He had it all, you know.
I get grief, Mitchell, because I say Chicago. And even from my wife, she's like, it's Chicago. And I'm like, well, then I heard you say it in the play and you hit it hard.
Yeah. Well, that's how he said it. It's so funny. People don't
hear you say it. Say it like you do in the play.
Chicago.
There you go.
Yeah. That's how he said it. People ask me about that all the time. When I did it in LA, they said, isn't it Chicago? And I was like, yeah, it's the way he said it, you know, Chicago. And there's a lot of people who say it Chicago, Chicago, you know? Yeah. So there's all these different ways of like, you know, I tried, because I don't look anything like him. I don't have the same body type. I'm not tall like him. I have a full head of hair. And I don't have a voice like he does. So I would try to find ways that make us common. I could definitely take his speech and take the things that he says and the way he says them and add it into the play and sprinkle it into the play. And so Chicago is one of those things where I had to really teach myself how to say it because it was so unnatural for me. But he said it that way. And, you know, we're talking about the thing that he talked about all the time. So I had to nail it, you know?
Yeah. You actually feature a number of dialects, so I was hoping you could share some of them. What's your favorite? What do you like to like? You do Canadian, you do Australian.
I do like Australian, yeah. Like so I'll be like, that is, or like how like people from Australia they'll do like every one of the animals are like this wallybagger, you know, he's like a kookaburra, you know, like everything sounds crazy, so. I always like doing that. I'll be like, oh, yeah, right, mate. We'll be right, mate. No worries. You know, we've got a Bondi Beach. It makes people who are really Australian like crazy.
Oh, I'm sure. Because
we go to the liquor, get some beer. Let's get a beer, mates. It's like the silly version of it. I mean, I could do it if I had to do it in earnest, I would, but I'm play acting for you right now.
What's RP? I saw that. What is that?
RP is what is it? Royal pronunciation. Oh, which is like, you know, so if you're British and you're speaking like the Queen's English, you know,
right, proper English,
right. But if you're like a Scouse, you know, like from Liverpool, I'm slipping into Australian, but you know, they have a different way of speaking. So anybody outside of like London doesn't speak RP. You know, they speak Scouse is like Liverpool. And it's more like working class or
is that what they call Cockney? Yeah, right.
Cockney is like Cockney's like East London, the Bow Bells. If you were born within hearing distance of the Bow Bells, you're Cockney.
Mitchell, it's great to catch up with you. Thanks for the time. I really appreciate it. Best of luck with the rest of the show and the new run. And we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Hey, can I give a little pitch out to buy tickets and everything like that?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the show's running November 14th to December 22nd at the Chopin Theater. It's a remount. We've done a couple swap outs of pieces. We've added some stuff about Harold Washington. We've sort of lost a couple pieces that weren't working. I did a cleanup on the script. And so we've gotten the opportunity to do it again. You can get tickets at royko.brownpapertickets.com. Mm-hmm. And would love it. People came out and saw it. I'm so happy to be on the show. It's great talking to you. It was a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it. And if you go to the show, you just should hope that Mitchell's mom is there, because if she is, she's going to buy you a beer and put it on Mitchell's tab.
She's going to go grab snacks. You'll recognize her by the woman who's just going behind the bar and grabbing snacks and waters.
Thanks again, Mitchell.
Thank you so much, Joe. Great talking with you.
Take care. My thanks to Mitchell and his mom for passing along my number. The show's called Mike Royko, the toughest man in Chicago, at the very intimate Chopin Theater. We are a small but efficient group at Chicago Unscripted. Brian Griggs with Brian Griggs Productions deciphers my chicken scratch and notes and does all the editing and post-production work. My thanks to Ellie Coder, who provides production and editing support for social media. The music provided by my friend Thaddeus Tukes. If you're in Chicago, check out his schedule and take in some of his jazz. I'm a huge fan of the vibes, and I appreciate him coming up with the soundtrack. I'm honored to have the legendary Bill Curtis lend his voice to the intro. Look for him, by the way, on a future episode soon. And as always, I thank you for listening to Chicago Unscripted.